You introduce yourself very quickly, name, brand, serial number, but also tell me what's the one technology related disruption or just any disruption uh, that made you sit up and said, "Oh man, this is something." So over the last 2 months or so. Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me here. I'm Vivek. I'm a partner at TPG. I run our tech and tech services practice on the boards of Fractal Analytics, Antimetric, the PCS AI data center setup, and semiconductor resisting to sound. So we've been very playing on this ecosystem for a while. So glad to be on this panel. Thanks for having me as sort of. So look, I think we as investors, we've been and TPG, just for context, we're also investors in OpenAI, Anthropic, and XAI, and SpaceX, which is now effectively XAI. So we've been on the sidelines of this for a while now, even before the action you've been seeing over the last couple of years. And even as we've looked at tech services, we've sort of taken the view that the automation, for lack of better words, or the disruption is imminent. And that's how we picked our companies like Fractal, companies like Altimetric, to stay ahead of the curve. So I think that's been the view, and some of it is playing through. We should talk about it a little bit more. But in terms of just what's really caught my attention for the last 2 months. In fact, actually last week, right? I think two things happened. You had both the OpenAI Codex, the latest Codex, come out, as well as the Opus, and I think so we have some insight and understanding of how these guys think about it. But so, the first big killer app was always meant to be coding, as LLMs thought about it, because the underlying fundamental belief is that if AI gets really good at coding, it can then start generating the next versions of AI and the next versions of everything else all by itself. And I think what you saw last week was sort of the first real example of what it can do beyond coding and sort of move beyond that. And hence you're seeing this dramatic overreaction in the public markets on what was originally SaaS software stocks, IT services stocks, then private equity stocks fell on Friday. Last night it was, wealth management and discount broking stocks. So I think the market is still trying to understand that what has just happened, where what was seen as a helpful coding tool is now becoming, sort of life-threatening in some ways. So I think we're all sort of crossing that, but that's the big work. Yeah, that's great.
So I'll just introduce myself. This is Amit, and I lead a team of solution architects at NVIDIA, and they're essentially a data scientist. They work with government, they work with Indian ISVs, GCCs, and some of the services company as well. Yeah.
So what's the one thing that make you stand up in terms of disruption over the last 2 months?
So I would say pretty much, every day it's happening, right? Yeah, every day it's happening. And I would like to start with that, the one prediction, and that was the quote by Jensen, the opinions. The soon IT department would be the HR of the agent from Sanjay. And there was no framework. There was some framework, open source framework was there for building the multi-agent system and all. But the launch by OpenAI Frontier, to me, that was like a big thing. It's of recent, and it's just like a Codex 5.3 and the 4.5. These are like model users. But Frontier, I would say that that's would be a big thing essentially.
Yeah,
as well as it will have impact on the ER industry.
I think if anybody hasn't seen the OpenAI Frontier, you should check out that webpage. It's the most lucid, and I mean that in a very good way, lucid explanation of what we've been talking about. Besides about Shikha.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shikha Bountra Jetley. I run finance operations for JLN Mobile.
What's your one disruption, one thing that made you stand up?
Well, actually, given that there are on the panel people who understand technology way better than me, I will stick to business.
Not business disruption.
And I think the disruption that technology is bringing in, that business leaders are standing up and acknowledging from front to back, has been the most interesting thing in the last few months that I've observed. From being, from being watchers to saying, hey, this is a competitive advantage. I need to get there. Somebody said something about FOMO in a previous discussion. and how that is playing out suddenly, has been most interesting to watch.
Fantastic. Sanjay? So I'm Sanjay. I'm from Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and I'm responsible for the global innovation centers, that we have 5 of in Bangalore also. In terms of what's keeps me up at night is the pace at which things are changing on a daily basis. And when you look at that, it's like, so how does that implicate my operating model, my structure? And so the structure is now so fluid. So just today, I never heard of AI, which I think Phil mentioned. And then soon after, I read about rent-to-human.ai. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you've heard about rent-to-human.ai, which is now agents looking for humans who can perform work that the agents can't perform. Right? So what next? So to me, I was actually texting my boss just recently, and I was like, so what's next? Because it's evolving so quickly that I think that the mindset and ability to adapt and be agile and not have the operating model that's so fixated in a particular way, which doesn't allow us to kind of move as time's going to move, as new things come up. So I think that's what, again, it's like Shikha is more on business disruption, and how do we keep up with it? Yeah, to rent a human. Sudipta?
So I'm Sudipta, and I co-head the Bank of New York in India, and it just has a very quick introduction to Bank of New York. It's about 242 years old, so it's older than the American Constitution. It's a number one, custodian. So we have about $60 trillion of assets under custody, which is about twice the GDP of New York, twice the GDP of the US. So when when I think about one thing that's been disruptive, just going back a couple of years when ChatGPT came onto the horizon, I still remember, one of my uncle, he started using ChatGPT, and he would search for things like, what's the side effect of taking a medicine or something like that, right? It's almost like, Google on steroids. Then came Copilot, and Copilot said, hey, here is something that will work alongside you and maybe make you slightly smarter, save you a little bit of time or something like that, right? So that's when Copilot. Now when you look at the industry, it's all of that is like way behind, right? Today we are talking about digital employees. Today we are talking about employees, that can work 24/7 with least human intervention, and therefore it's completely changing the way we work, right? And while I can't say anything that's in the private domain, but there was a CNBC news article that I think that just came out a day back talking about Bank of New York and mentioning the fact that, there is close to about 140 digital engineers in the firm, and we are spending about 19% of our revenues on, engineering and technology, which is absolutely the highest in the industry.
Fantastic. So but maybe I'll start with you because you have the mic. So what do you think our services industry, and services, I'm taking a broad brush, into consulting, GCCs, IT service providers, BPO, we services industry. Do you think it will look fundamentally different in 3 years? And what's the one stark difference that we'll be able to observe?
I think so. And especially as we think about the way AI is transforming things, I think there's going to be 2 spaces where it's going to be broadly different, right? One is the fact that I think we are going to see smaller platforms, more modular platforms, rather than one being, massive product. Because that's much more agile. You can make changes much more quickly. You can move them around, customize them the way you want. All given now, you can really, sort out the things with AI, right? So the pace of changes are going to be much faster. Everything's going to be much more agile, but you're going to have a lot of small platforms rather than something that's, difficult to maneuver. So the second thing is, when we think about products, right, a lot of products are going to be very much ingrained into our day-to-day applications, right? So when we think about
banking apps today, we just think, oh, I'm going to open up a Standard Chartered bank and figure out how much balance do I have? Do I need to pay a certain bill or not? And I think all of these will start converging, or let's say, I want to book at Uber, I go on to another app and so on and so forth. You see a little bit of this already happening in China, where you have unified apps where you can book an Uber, buy groceries, and check your bank balances and all of that stuff. I think that's going to end up getting much more widespread, where you have one touch point really for everything.
Yeah. Shikha, you've been on both sides. You've been a buyer and a seller, if I'm right. Do you think services industry will look different in 3 years?
Very much so.
Well, what's the one thing that we can expect and visibly see?
I think how work is done will look very different, from how it is being done today, how we were doing it. Like you said, rent a human agents, orchestration agents, how you work across the entire spectrum will look really different. In how organizations build how work is done.
Yeah. So we've been, obviously, we coined this term services as software. I keep saying last year, but it's now 2024, so it's year before last. But we believe that this thing, services as software, is going to be almost like a new category that will absorb revenue both from software and services. Because I think even the software, like you were just mentioning, Vivek, is going to go through some changes. So this is the model that we are sort of looking at now. The question is, do we look at it as an opportunity or a threat, right? It's a $1.5 trillion opportunity or a threat, because it's going to absorb revenue from somebody. Or do you look at it as, oh my God, this is an opportunity, and people like Vivek will be willing to spend money and write big checks on that. But the question for me, and I'd like to have an audience poll if possible, is what gets disrupted first? Because services is a large, and I'll ask all of you to get your point, but it'd be good if we can run the poll. Is it going to be BPO, transactional business process services, finance, accounts payable? Like in today's world, why do you have 1,000 people processing invoices? But still, most companies have it, right? Is it going to be BPO? Is it going to be consulting? Do you still want to work with McKinsey? Is it going to be IT services? Is it going to be GCCs? Because GCC is the two sides of the same coin. Is it going to be software that we've said? So all of the above, none of the above. I think as the audience polls, maybe we'll again get your views. Yeah. And what gets from. So and just responding to your previous question as well, right? It's just fundamentally, I think there's inconsistency. There are 2-3 parts of the IT services business model that are fundamentally hold the cheapest, right? First is the pricing model. The price per FTE per hour staffing business model is dead, right? And if anything, the price for FTE will remain for the highest end sort of on-site forward deployed engineers. We do not see that sustaining at the low end, because now we will fundamentally see a fixed price or outcome or output-based pricing. So that's the first real disruption that's going to happen, and that's not going to be an easy shift for all IT services firms. The second, in the pyramid model as it stands, which is linked to the first, which is you go hire these 30,000-40,000 fresh grads and sort of push them through and then sort of churn it up. That is again, because the price per FTE model is broken, that will again go away, because the lowest end work is what is most at threat. And this is not just in IT services, to your point on services software. We're seeing this in legal firms. We're seeing this in consulting firms. We're seeing this in tax, compliance, audit, right? Every part where the lowest end of the spectrum is the most disrupted, because that requires the least amount of judgment. And that's where AI is already outperforming your first quartile, associate analyst, whatever you will, right? So the pricing model is changing. Your delivery model the staffing must change, and your delivery model has to change accordingly. And contracts, fundamentally, I don't think you'll get those $500 million 5-year contracts anymore. If that happens, it will happen in the context of, what we're seeing guys like Accenture do right now, also some of the larger guys, which is just really go and it comes to even service providers. I haven't had any service provider coming proactively to us saying, hey, in the context and light of like agentic AI, let's kind of revisit how our business should be done. If it's a service-based or FTV-based operating model, it's more driven by the business, putting the pressure on them, and also on the GCC. Like even in those GCCs where they've got 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, the pressure is felt there already, right? Because well, we can see AI and agent can do a lot more faster, more the repetitive tasks. Why are we having so many kind of people-based roles doing those tasks, right? So I think the operating model takes the output pressure to service providers, but also inward pressure to those heavy people-based kind of functions or organization within operations.
Yeah. So I want to ask Amit the same question, but before I go there, I had a follow-up for you, Sanjay, because you are one of the few people that I know who's led in both GBS organization and IT organization. How do you think is getting more pressure right now?
Just my perspective in my kind of organization right now, it's more the tech organization, because the demand and at least with this in our organization, we call it, I think we've heard about like learning, digital learning. So we have this whole digital dexterity program, which is across the entire enterprise. So everyone is supposed to be somewhat digital savvy based on where your role is or what your role is. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of demand. We have our own in-house built like a co-pilot called Mind Aibo. Aibo is a Japanese word for friend. And we have out of 55,000 employees, we have about 40,000 plus active users of the internal like agent or co-pilot that we built in a safe environment. So a lot of people see the value. So the demand's coming up a lot to the business, to high technology organizations saying, hey, we need this. But we're also thinking about, going back to your point, it's like, how do we leverage agents being built on enterprise platforms and the scalability of those agents? It's no longer, I can build one agent, I give it to you, and life is all hunky-dory. No, it's how do I take that one agent and scale across multiple users? So there's a lot more pressure on us to get that, like the responsible AI, especially in a highly regulated industry. How do we get that right? How do we make sure that the agents we are building are safe, secure, and do the right thing? So, but yeah, it's the pressure is more, I'd say, on us, right? Because everyone is pretty savvy. Like you said, the Sunday, Monday, yeah, like they get an experience, they come back to work and say, why can't I get the same here?
Yeah, I'm Amit, who goes first?
So I would say, I mean, pretty much disruption word would be, I think for GCC, I would say re-mandate. Because as mentioned that the mandate would be different now, so not just shipping the code that we have $65 billion export right now with GCC side. So it would be more because my team essentially, we work with GCC, we know what they're doing in real time. And now the mandate has shifted essentially in, building AI platforms. So instead of just shipping the code, they are becoming the platform owners. And one point I see that in 3SF, obviously, I mean, BPO, IT services, pretty much, I mean, it's obvious that they are only getting impacted. I mean, we see that, right? The one thing that I see in 3 years coming up is that every enterprise, because NVIDIA has been on the both side, we are the user of AI as well, because we have built our own foundation module for writing the chip design code and all that. And also we are building the AI for the world, essentially, right? Pretty much everything runs on NVIDIA, right? So what we have seen that in the 3 years that one of the prediction that I can have is that every organization will start owning the AI, because this has become infrastructure, right? And you'd like to own it. Now, countries owning it, India AI mission, government push, we know that next week we all are going to, many of you are going to Impact Summit, right? So it has become that issue. Second thing, I would say that the focus right now, we are talking more about, consumption point of view. Soon the focus would be more on, if you see the model release, you'll see the prices of energy companies goes up, right? Because this whole infrastructure play is going to be more and more important.
Yeah, no, let's see what the audience said. If we can bring up the whole things.
This is a little different, but the internal knowledge, the mandate, as he said, will change. I agree with the two gentlemen that came before me. What GCCs do and how they do it will be different. Their destruction is of a somewhat different time.
And so, Sudipta, let me ask you a different question. And it's like, as this plays out, it's all of the above. Let's say we go with this data point, and what will separate people who thrive and survive and there'll be winners and losers, right? In this tech, what separate them in your view?
That's a really good question. So a couple of things on there, right? One is before I answer your question directly, when we think about AI today, right? A lot of people who are here today with us would have had leadership coaches, right? Some point of their career, I've had leadership coaches. And today, if you look at what AI can do, it can basically replace a leadership coach, right? I've done it. I'm sure many of the people are doing it today. You can upload a bunch of, documents, your feedback, your reviews, various assessments that you take. And your AI leadership coach can actually do much better than probably, your own leadership coach would, a human leadership coach would. Secondly, when you think about, investments, money and everything, typically you go to a big bank, they'll have wealth advisors. That person will tell you invest in X, invest in Y. You will have to believe them, whether you like them or not. And you will probably do what they are saying. You don't need that anymore, right? The same thing AI can absolutely do. And potentially do much better. When you look at a lot of the examples today, Claude can outperform a lot of different, market funds and traders as well. So when you put all of that together, the whole point is AI today is a superpower, right? Now, there will be people who are afraid of AI, who are not willing to embrace AI, see that, okay, AI is not good, there's several problems or whatever, it's going to take away jobs and therefore I won't. But the point is that AI is another new technology, just like computers were, a couple of decades back. If you don't embrace AI, if you don't utilize it as a superpower, if you don't take the benefit of it and learn quickly, you're going to be left behind, right? So people who will be successful are the ones who are able to learn at speed and have direction in terms of what they are trying to do. And this technology is changing so fast, obviously you'll be able to see that much more better than me. But in pace of change that we see over here, we haven't seen this in a lot of industries. And therefore, the whole point is you need to keep on learning extremely fast.
Yeah. Sanjay, what's your...
Yeah, so I will repeat what was I agree with everything. But maybe a couple of things. One, today I've been processed many times, right? So I think that's one area where if you are applying AI, agentics, on any of these processes, it's like, don't make the same mistake we made with RPA, where we didn't fix the process. We just didn't put a lot of band-aids. And then those band-aids started kind of ripping off, and then we didn't see the value, and those RPAs were not kind of used anymore. So I think for agentics to have the right value, I'd say, look at the process, fix the process first. Then within the process, identify who are the personas who are actually playing a role in performing those steps within the process. And within the persona, to do detailed activity analysis, see where an agent will actually play a role, and can that be scaled across multiple similar personas, because that's how you will get the scale. So I think those to really take a step back, not to go fast and put all the agents, because the more agents you put on a bad process, the more complex the process is going to get, and the less value you will see. Second, again, we've heard about data. We've always heard about data is the oil, but now it really matters. Without data, you aren't going to get good. And I think, again, we've heard that. So that's the second one. And third, and doing nothing is not an option. And I know we've talked about even in the session this morning, it's about leadership courage. But rather than putting leadership debt, is leadership courage. Are we willing to go and just disrupt the model? Are we willing to have those tough conversations and even trying, within measured risks, within the guardrails, to do something that's bold, that hasn't been done before, and not keep waiting for everyone else to get it done, because by then you may lose some of that advantage you may have in terms of a negotiating power with a third party if you try to transform with them, which, if they get it right, in the future that will cost you more. And that's one of your slide, the $1.5 trillion industry. That's where the industry is heading. But it's the early winners may kind of get some advantages that late movers may not. So
yeah, fantastic. Vivek, who are you betting on? How do you make that? What's your algorithm?
Yeah, should we invest right after this?
That's like that.
The satellite is still open. It's closing today. So, but look, I think just take a step back, right? And I know this sounded very negative earlier, but here's the good news. Services, AI is services, right? It's not there's a very SaaS framework that a lot of people use to think about AI as a product that you can buy off the shelf. You really need someone to make it specific to your context, your data, and your workflows. So there is incredible services involved. In fact, OpenAI is opening up its own services organization, forward deployed engineers. We investors there as well. And so AI is services, except, if you just go back to the history of service and the history of this entire IT service industry, each technology shift, a new set of winners and some losers who get left behind. And so be it your original Y2K where everyone came out, your names like Fentersoft, I don't know about people remember all that back in the day, but then an Infosys and an ACS sort of were able to take off from what was a Y2K build out to go building out systems of record like ERPs and CR, right? Then you had the likes of HCL really figured out how to do the lift and shift and the infrastructure lift and shift. And then came cloud where you had guys like, again, Mindtree or Persistent who really came out and were able to take advantage of that digital wave. So we do see such winners emerging in every part of the ecosystem. And so the new set of winners that will emerge now will be the nimble ones, the guys who are able to actually think about, disrupting their own delivery model, the pricing model, right? And get their org structures in place so that you can actually price an AI associate and a human associate differentiate. We're already seeing that disruption play out in BPOs where we have a bunch of guys who actually have human agents and AI agents, and human agents is $10 an hour and AI agents are, $2 an hour, and figure out what moves from where to where. So you will start to see those hybrid models evolve. So it's really about people willing to take that. I mean, for the incumbents or large especially, I think it's very important that there's a process of creative destruction where they have to go through the space. For the new guys, the opportunity exists. Go build a fantastic team of forward deployed engineers, have your own internal IP and platforms, and then sell around it. Yeah, right. And don't do it on the FTE based model. Do it on sort of the fixed price and output based models. I think that's sort of where this is only
fantastic. So before I let you go, I'll ask one personal question to all of you, and maybe I'll start from this side now because I started from that side. It's and that is, what are you personally doing differently? Because I think there's an enterprise question, then there's an industry question, but there's also a personal question. What are you personally doing differently in your capacity as let's say BNY ahead to navigate this whole stuff?
Learn at speed, learn at scale. You just don't have the ability to stop learning anymore. The world is changing faster than we've ever imagined it to, or probably we wanted it to. And the only way that you can continue being successful is just by staying ahead of it.
So learn. Sanjay?
Yeah, it can be very simple. So I'm helping my team and my leadership team and my broad organization to learn to operate in this world of a lot of ambiguity, because having precision and clarity is no longer something that's a luxury. It's just like we can't get that because things are changing. So how do we get to learn to operate within ambiguity, but within the right kind of guardrails to get things done?
Ambiguity, yeah, fantastic. Shikha?
I think for myself and my teams, learning to go from hindsight, insight to foresight.
Hindsight to foresight.
Hindsight,
insight to foresight. Fantastic. Amit?
See, I will say, anyway, learning has to be otherwise, will be obsolete, right? One thing that I would like to highlight is that, when you ask that, what's going to happen, right? These are the industry-wise, but as an individual, like somebody's programmer, somebody's, investor, somebody's, manager, what will happen to them, right? And that's the question everybody has. So what I feel is that now, and I've seen it happening in the industry, that somebody who understands where AI fails, what are the limitation of the AI is, those guys actually will thrive in coming years because most of the jobs here AI is going to do. Somebody has to supervise the AI. So who are the guys? So those guys will thrive essentially. And that's where
very good point. Yeah. So basically you're saying you're figuring out as NVIDIA.
Yeah, that's true.
That's going to be fantastic. Vivek, what are you doing personally?
Yeah, no, personally, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So I'm making sure that they are as AI native as it gets, AI native babies as it gets. And because fundamentally, I don't believe that current career paths where you could just join and go up as associate and vice president and director and managing director, goes to get remarkably disrupted. Entry-level jobs in any kind of white collar services is going to be at the threat, be it banking or consulting. So for just making sure that I train them here on UGA and fundamentally also train them on resilience, because it's all going to be about in the career, your careers will shift 5-6 times in your life versus the 1 or 2 that we've experienced as our generation. So that's what I'm on.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much